A.
Good morning and welcome to Backchat. I'm Hugh Chewett and your co-host today is Ada Wong. Ada, good morning to you.
Good morning, Hugh.
We're talking today about the basic law, China's constitution and the Communist Party. At a big conference last week, Beijing officials said that the national constitution was the foundation for one country, two systems and had a mother-son relationship with the basic law. The liaison officer's legal affairs chief said that the core part of the constitution was the endorsement of the Communist Party and that some Hong Kongers had asked if they could accept the city was part of the country but wanted to reject the leadership of the Communist Party. But in fact, there was no way to separate China from the Chinese Communist Party, as the nation was led and established by the party. So should we accept the reality that we're part of Red China? With civil servants now receiving briefings from prominent party officials, is the party changing its role here? Can you love China but not the party? What actually is the relationship between China's constitution and the basic law? Email us backchat@rthk.hk, our Facebook page Backchat and RTHK Radio 3. After 9:20, we're talking about the fate of the Empire Theatre in North Point. Joining us now, we have Phyllis Kwong, a practicing solicitor, president of the Asia Pacific Law Association.
Lawrence, good morning.
Good morning to you. Lawrence Ma is a barrister, chairman of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation, and Michael Davis, we hope, senior fellow in the Centre for Comparative and Public Law at the University of Hong Kong. Phyllis Kwong, let's start with you. Good morning. Thank you much for joining us. I think, to be honest, quite a lot of people in Hong Kong would try to draw a line between the party and the nation, and they would say that maybe they don't like the Communist Party, but they love China. I think what we were hearing last week was that you can't logically do that, that the Constitution has a role for the Communist Party, and so you have to accept the reality and the role of the Communist Party as in China, leading China. That's, as I say, it's a kind of surprise to some people because people didn't understand the party to be operating in that way. What are your thoughts?
It's a surprise because the party system or the political system is different from the Western mode. You know, in China we don't have party politics. Although there are many. Well, the Communist Party is not the only party in China. There are other parties. But yes, it's true that the political system in China is that it is led by the Communist Party.
Yeah, and they have a place in the Constitution.
Yes, they have. They actually, if you read the Constitution, it says that it is led by the Communist Party. It is a so-called Chinese-style socialism. Turning China into a socialist country that is prosperous, powerful, democratic, culturally advanced. It's a surprise, perhaps, in the Western concept that the Hong Kong people are probably more familiar with. But that is an enemy because, if we are part of a country, if we're part of China, I think we should really get to know the way that China is run.
Is it just a question of getting to know, or is it something else?
Oh, well, it's getting to know. I mean, that is the first step. If you don't know, you don't. It's just. I think it's surprising in the sense.
This is just for your information, is it? This is.
It's surprising in the sense that we are part of China for 20 years. And it seems that the Hong Kong people know so little about, how the country is run just across the border. And I think there's a lot to catch up.
Some people would say we know a lot about how the country is run, and we don't look at the Constitution if we want to know how the country is run. That the Constitution, especially in China, bears very little relation to the reality. You say it's a democratic country. It's obviously not a democratic country, for example.
No. If you read the preamble of the Constitution, it says it is a system of multi-party cooperation and political consultation led by the Communist Party.
Yeah, it's not a multi-party country, is it?
It's multi-party cooperation.
It's not.
It is not party politics in the British sense or the US sense.
There aren't multiple parties. I mean, there are, there's one man in a cupboard who represents some party or something like this. It's not in reality. What I'm saying is that people in Hong Kong would say, we understand how China works. The Constitution does not help us to understand how China actually really works. Don't they have a point?
No. If you don't, I think the starting point is that it's a starting point is that, there's something mystical or something, it is so different from what we know so that we reject it. I think it is different from what we are familiar with. But then I think the starting point is to get to know, what is it all about. After all, it is a system that has run and that has ruled 1.3 billion people and is making the country stronger and stronger. So that is something that's worth knowing or even studying.
Ms. Kwong, you mentioned at the beginning that it was a surprise, and I read...
surprised that we know so little about it.
Yes, but also on the point of this relationship between the national constitution and the basic law, I happened to read a newspaper column by Zhang Yuxing,
yes.
And he said that the national constitution is not really mentioned in the basic law. And the point, the Central People's Government having a supervisory role for Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy is also really not really set out in the basic law. I'm not sure whether I have misread his article, but it seems that it is a new concept that this mother and son relationship. What do you make of it?
If that is really what Mr. Sung has said, it is another surprise. He should know better. If you read the preamble of the basic law, it says very, very clearly that it is the basic law is the Hong Kong SAR is established in accordance with Article 31 of the Constitution of the People's Republic of China. That is the foundation of the basic law. Article 31 of the Constitution of the People's Republic of China, and under the principle of one country, two systems. So, in a way, Hong Kong people can be more relaxed and feel more secured because one country, two systems is not only guaranteed by the basic law. In fact, it has its root in the Constitution of the country. Which applies to all, every people, including, Premier Xie or, everybody in the central government in Beijing and in Hong Kong. So I think Hong Kong people, this root or this foundation being in the constitution of the country makes us more confident that the one country, two systems formula is secured.
But you're saying that the Chinese constitution is basically of academic interest. It's of no applicability in Hong Kong. It's of no direct relevance. It's part of the history of the basic law in essence.
No. It is in the preamble of the basic law. It is not academic interest, of course. It is running. It is the Constitution for any country is the fundamental system of how the country is structured, where the powers and everything is organized. Okay. So I think if it is rooted in the Constitution, that means that one country, two system is secured. It's not just the basic law. Okay.
Lawrence Ma, good morning to you.
Good morning, Hugh and Ada.
Good morning. The trouble is that, there are direct contradictions, aren't there, between the Chinese constitution and the basic law. The Chinese constitution details a socialist country. And the Basic Law specifies that socialism is not to be practiced in Hong Kong. I mean, that's a fundamental. You couldn't get a more fundamental kind of divide between them. So the relationship between them seems rather tricky. It's not really mother and son, because the son is doing something completely different to the mother.
Well, mother gives birth to a child.
Yeah, okay, so that's, as I say, that's of historical interest or something, but of no relevance.
Now, if you want to put it in precise terms, I mean...
I don't ask your mother about what things that you're doing or what you should do, because you're a grown-up.
Yes. Now, we don't have the Basic Law unless we have Article 31 of the Chinese Constitution, which says that, well, since 1982, there is this new Article 31, which allows the country to set up special administrative regions. Now, without that, we don't have Hong Kong as they are. And also, under Section 6213, the NPC SC can formulate the system to be practiced in the SAR with an S, because we have Macau too. So without basic PRC Constitution 6213, we don't have our one country two system in practice now. So, I mean, these would be the two direct articles that applies. Now, if we talk about interpretation of the Basic Law, we have a provision here in the Basic Law which allows the NPCFC to interpret. But in fact, this law is also contained in the Constitution in Article 67.4, which the Constitution authorized the NPCFC, the Standing Committee, to interpret laws. Therefore, the NPCFC has the power to interpret the Basic Law, which is the national law of the PRC. I hope I want to make people understand that clearer now.
Lawrence, is there an interpretation of what is meant by one country, two systems in there as well?
It wasn't written down in the Basic Law. It was written down in the Basic Law, but it's not in the Constitution. If you allow me to come back to some of the questions you asked Phyllis before, if you asked her that there was no mention of the actual running of the PRC by the Communist Party. If you compare the constitution of other what is called civilized Western democracies, for example Australia, they do not have mention of political parties at all in their constitution. Constitution of a state is usually used to set up the political structure of that particular country, and the name of any particular political party would not be referred to in the constitution at all, because one day you have the Liberal Party in Australia, and then you have the Labour Party, and then they might disappear. So our constitution, as in Chinese constitution, would have referred to the Communist Party only in the preamble, which is already a step further ahead than other Western constitutions.
Sorry, why is that a step ahead?
Because it is the Communist Party that has established the People's Republic of China. They fought the Kuomintang, they fought the Japanese, and it finally comes down to a united China. That's why they are the major contributors to a united China, and therefore they have their names written down in the preamble. Whereas if you compare to Australia, that doesn't happen. For example, people settle in New South Wales and Victoria, all this from England, and there was no Australian country, Australasia, at that time.
Right.
Yeah, so they come together and form a state.
Can you clarify this? Because you kind of hear it both ways. That some people will say that the Communist Party's role and the party is specified in the Constitution. Some will say, well, it's just in the preamble. You're kind of saying it's just in the preamble. I'm not quite sure. Are you saying that the Communist Party is an integral part of the Constitution, or isn't?
Well, if you read other than the preamble, the Communist Party wasn't mentioned there. No.
Well,
so, yeah.
Well, not exactly, but it's yeah. Let me find the. it's alluded to.
It's hard to do it.
But Lawrence, the liaison office is now saying that the core part of the national constitution was the endorsement of the Communist Party. So where is that? Where is the endorsement written?
Sorry, I missed your question. Can you repeat that?
The liaison office recently, they've been, reiterating that the core part of the national constitution is the endorsement of the Communist Party. So, I mean, I know very, very little about the national constitution. Where is it written, and where is this endorsement?
I guess you would want to say is Article 1, which says that the socialist system is to be practiced in PRC, obviously, and the Chinese Communist Party is the party that promulgates or advances the socialist system in China. So that I guess that would be an aspect of how the constitution incorporates the party, if you want to see it that way.
Well, if I may just say the preamble, as you say, of the constitution of any document is the very basic principles, very basic of the whole document, of the whole constitution, and it says very clearly, as I just mentioned, the system of multi-party cooperation and political consultation led by the Communist Party of China will exist and develop for a long time to come, and that is in the preamble of the China Constitution, PRC Constitution, and that really is entrenched. I'm confused. The whole constitution.
I'm confused because you and Lawrence Ma seem to be saying different things. You're kind of saying it's integral, the party, and Lawrence Ma, you seem to be saying it isn't.
It is.
It depends on how you see it, because I mean the system there, practiced as a social system, is the system that's advocated by the Communist Party. But if you want to read it in detail, it doesn't say the Communist Party other than in the preamble.
But socialist system, I mean, just for academic debate, it can be promulgated by other parties, right?
Oh, it can, but of course, I mean, other political parties in China also, to a certain extent, nowadays support the socialist system. So we have, as Phyllis correctly pointed out, that we have a multi-party cooperation system instead of a multi-party contest system.
Okay. Well, Michael Davis is also with us from the University of Hong Kong, Senior Fellow at the Centre for Comparative and Public Law there. Ms. Davis, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I think you've been listening to the discussion so far.
Yes, I have.
What do you think about this? Can I go back to my original kind of point, which was that I think a lot of people in Hong Kong would draw a hard and fast line, and they might say, I love my country, but I don't love the Communist Party. And now, basically, we're being told that doesn't make sense. If you love your country, you've got to at least respect the Communist Party. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the Deng Xiaoping kind of made a point years ago after the one country, two systems model was, reflected in the Sino-British Treaty and then the Basic Law that people, Hong Kong people, should be patriotic to the country and that they need not support the Communist Party. So now, of course, Xi Jinping is starting to integrate the party even into the government. It was interesting when Deng was still around, or right after he passed away, Zhao Ziyang was trying to separate party from government and trying to remove party sections from branches of especially the courts and so on. So the Chinese history on this has sort of gone back and forth about how important the party is and so on. And right now it's sort of at a high point in that regard, and it seems to be creeping across the border into Hong Kong. I think the thing about it, all of this, is if you make this move, you make it more difficult for Hong Kong people to be patriotic in that sense. I think their patriotism would be greater if the central government was less heavy-handed, and if it was an idea that they be loyal to their country and not to the political party that's in charge of the country at the moment. And I think the one country, two systems also tried to separate the two in a bit, to have Hong Kong system different, practiced differently, and the socialist system removed. I think the question was raised whether Hong Kong people understand the mainland. I think they understand it all too well. This has been the problem. So the gap between the two systems and the more heavy-handed sort of system of governance on the mainland is something that many Hong Kong people fled. Their grandparents or some of them themselves fled over the many years. And so when Deng Xiaoping came to town, his message was sort of put your hearts at ease. But by the time we get now to where we're at now, it's almost like the message is changed from put your hearts at ease to Beijing is the boss. And I think this is really counterproductive if the goal is to get people in Hong Kong to trust the one country, two systems model, and so on. I mean, it's interesting. A couple years ago, people were saying Lung Chunying was the father of the independence movement. The suggestion being that all this ignoring of Hong Kong people's concerns and core values and a sort of supporting the long arm of the central government reaching in more and more into Hong Kong was what was causing an independence movement. There never was an independence movement in Hong Kong for all these many years, even through the handover and so on. So the more of this kind of thing is done, the more Hong Kong people push back. And you can't blame them for pushing back because their very identity is at stake. This one country, two systems aim to put their hearts at ease, to make them feel confident that the kind of open society that they enjoy would be maintained. But now they will certainly feel more and more fear about this. And so lecturing them in this way, I say, is counterproductive. I'd like to see a lot of the pro-establishment people speak to the central government and try to help the central government to understand these concerns. But we don't see that. We see more whenever Beijing gives a signal that the local pro-establishment people all get in line to support it like a chorus, rather than, they grew up in this society. They must understand what people's concerns are. And I think it would be much more constructive if there was more attention paid to that. But that's just the perception I have of it. And this I see as just another step, another nail in the coffin, if you will. I think Hong Kong people historically were very proud of being Chinese, but the kinds of things that are going on now and the way this is being done is, I think, causing them to have the opposite feeling.
Yes, you mentioned it is counterproductive at this point of time, but legally, on the relevance of the national constitution to Hong Kong, do you think that the constitution has not only a symbolic but also a substantive effect, as some liaison office leaders have been saying?
Well, I think the Constitution provided the foundation. Yes, it is in Article 31, the idea of one country, two systems. And then a Sino-British treaty was signed to carry out this idea and to give shape to it. And that was approved by the NPC Standing Committee. So this agreement between Britain, which is a treaty, brought this all together. So it is very much rooted in this policy as elaborated in a treaty and then fulfilled. The treaty actually requires the enactment of the basic law and stipulates its content, and it fulfilled in the basic law. I think that narrative was one that made people reasonably comfortable.
The argument is, Michael Davis, that you can't have the basic law without the Chinese Constitution and the Article 31, as you said, and you can't have the Constitution without the party. And so, legally, the party plays a very, very fundamental part in Hong Kong. And we know in practical terms this is true. This is just proving the legal and the constitutional background.
As I understand it, I can't recall how banned from Hong Kong. So the thing about it is, yes, the party's there. When you look, I think there was about 5 constitutions since the communists took over in the 1940s. And what you saw over the evolution of these constitutions was less and less reference to the Communist Party, to the point now where it's only in the preamble. The preamble of the Chinese Constitution is almost like a narrative history of China. And many people actually characterize the Chinese Constitution as programmatic because a lot of what's in it isn't really enforceable as law. It's not enforced. I mean, there's a free speech article in the Chinese Constitution saying the Chinese people enjoy freedom of expression and so on. Of course, they don't, by any understanding that anyone has. So there's some kind of ideal is articulated there. But the reference to the Communist Party is in this narrative history, which is how the preamble to the Chinese Constitution is written. If it's printed, it takes 4 or 5 pages giving this narrative history. So this, how do we look at preambles? Preambles generally are not considered the operative articles of constitutions. they're stuck there as a kind of indication of sort of the character of the Constitution and so on. So there's no question the Communist Party rules China, but under the one country, two systems, the Communist Party has agreed to hold itself back and not to directly rule Hong Kong. And there's a lot of articles. It's not just a preamble in the Basic Law. There's a lot of articles in the Basic Law that signal very clearly that Hong Kong should have a high degree of autonomy. It's supposed to have a separate legal system, and so on. And it promises in the Basic Law ultimately of universal suffrage and so on. So this vision, if you look at the rights in the Basic Law, there's about 16 of them. 8 of them relate in one form or another to freedom of expression.
All right. Well,
it has a very liberal kind of character.
Okay.
So
well, we're going to break, Michael Davis. Sorry, we're going to break for we've got a break now for the news at 9 o'clock. We'll be back in 3 minutes' time. We're also going to be joined by Lin Feng from the City University School of Law. Later, also going to be talking about plans to develop the Empire Theatre in North Point. If you've got any thoughts, so drop us a line. Backchat@rthk.hk. Bowen just says, "Is the Cultural Revolution upon us now?" Backchat. That's Bowen's question. Here's the latest weather information before the news at 9 o'clock today. It's going to be mainly cloudy today, some sunny intervals too during the day, and a maximum temperature of about 20 degrees. A couple of light rain patches later. The outlook mainly cloudy with light rain patches the next couple of days. Cold at the weekend. 17 degrees now, humidity 68%.
THK.
Welcome back. This is Backchat on a Tuesday morning. It's Uncle Ray's birthday, actually, today. Happy birthday, Uncle Ray, the 12th of the 12th, 93, I think he is, today. Anyway, that's got nothing to do with the topic today, which is the Chinese Constitution, the Basic Law, and also the role of the party. This is basically inspired by a large conference that was held in Hong Kong, Constitution Day. It was suggested that Constitution Day be made a new public holiday, but it has led to a lot of discussion about the role of the Constitution of the People's Republic of China and the role of the party, the Communist Party, within that Constitution and its relationship to the Basic Law and what we do and how we run our laws in Hong Kong. We have with us now Michael Davis, Senior Fellow in the Centre for Comparative and Public Law at the University of Hong Kong, Lawrence Ma is a barrister, Chairman of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation, and in our central studio, Phyllis Kwong, Practising Solicitor and President of the Asia-Pacific Law Association. We're also joined now by Professor Lin Feng from the School of Law at City University of Hong Kong, and our email address once again is backchat@rthk.hk. Let's see what people have been saying. From Thomas in an email, law and reality are often not the same. A lot of answers to your discussions are given in the book Xi Jinping, The Governance of China, under the heading CPC Leadership is Essential to Chinese Socialism. Page 18 to 20 clearly lays out the reality. It says, amongst other things, the party exercises overall leadership over all areas of endeavour in every part of the country. The reality is that Hong Kong is in one country. That comes from Thomas. Mark says, many years ago, I questioned why political parties were not registered as such, but were registered as societies. The reply I received was that if political parties were recognised for what they were, the Communist Party would be recognised as a political party in Hong Kong. The explainer continued that if that was the case, the sheer number of communists in Hong Kong would outweigh any elections, thereby strengthening the CCP control over Hong Kong. Mark, thank you for that interesting insight. Professor Lin Feng, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning.
And thanks for joining us. So this, I think people, as I said at the beginning, were a little surprised by some of these statements about the role of the Constitution and also the role of the party, basically saying that the party is central to the Constitution and the Constitution is the foundation of the Basic Law. And yet the Communist Party in Hong Kong, as we've been hearing, has this kind of strange existence, doesn't it? A kind of half-life. Everyone knows it's there, but no one is allowed to mention it or say that it's there. Do you see this as the party coming out a little bit more? Do you think the party is wanting to establish its presence and its role in Hong Kong a little more clearly?
I don't think so. Look at the issue between the Constitution and the Basic Law. Actually, it was raised when the Basic Law was drafted. And at that time, find a practical solution to it. Basically saying part of the Constitution, Chinese Constitution, is applicable in Hong Kong, whereas others relating to socialism, etc., won't be applicable in Hong Kong. So that issue has continued until today and has not been resolved properly. Because in theory, the Constitution should be applicable to the whole country, including Hong Kong. But in practice, the Constitution is not included in Annex 3. So therefore, in Hong Kong, in reality, it's not applied. So that's the problem.
Phyllis Kwong, is that right?
It's a shock. You say the Constitution of China, PRC, does not apply in Hong Kong. Well, if we look at that, let's look at that. Well, for one country, of course, we are part of China. If you call that Red China, Hong Kong is part of Red China. That's a reality. And as I say, we mentioned many times, without Article 31 of the Constitution, there would not be basic law. There would not be one country and two system. So in that sense, the Constitution of PRC is operative in Hong Kong. On the other hand, it says one country, two systems. So if we cannot, one country, the two system is guaranteed not only by the basic law, but also authorized by the Constitution, Article 62 of the Constitution. And of course, under, the one country system, if we say that the social system and policies shall not be practiced in Hong Kong as they are, and the previous capitalist system and the way of life shall remain unchanged for 50 years. That is Article 5 of the Basic Law. So if we say that, without the Constitution, ignoring it, there would not be two systems either.
And furthermore, Professor Lin Feng, recently liaison office leaders have been saying that the Constitution applies to Hong Kong without needing to be added in Annex 3 of the Basic Law, because there's this mother and son relationship in law. How do you make of that?
Well, the mother and son relationship, I think that's fine, because the Constitution is the country's Constitution, as I said. And Basic Law is made according to Article 31 of the Chinese Constitution. So that is fine. Then what I'm talking about, it's not in practice, it's not implemented. It's from the sources of law perspective, because the Basic Law says very clearly that what are the sources of law in Hong Kong, and which is basically the Basic Law and those original laws in Hong Kong, and then all the national laws listed in Article 18. So here, when you look at the sources of law, what I mean by that is the court. When the court exercises its power, judicial power, to decide a case, whether the court can cite the Constitution to decide a case. In that sense, I'm saying that the court cannot actually cite the constitutional provision to decide a case.
Lawrence Ma, do you want to come in on that? That's true, isn't it? And also because the people were also saying, officials were saying, you shouldn't consider the Basic Law a constitutional document, but it's always referred to as a mini constitution, isn't it? That's the standard phrase. But so, is it a constitutional document or not?
Is not incorrect. It is not correct, because the Basic Law is a constitutional document, but it is not the Constitution of Hong Kong. There are certain provisions. For example, as the Constitution that establishes a State Council. Now, government officials in Hong Kong has to report to the State Council. That's under the Basic Law. Now, without the Constitution of the PRC being applicable, where do we find a reporting of entity to report to? Because there has to be a State Council, and the State Council is from the Constitution. And when we report our duty to the State Council, that's how the Constitution is relevant in the implementation of the Basic Law.
But that's the administrative side.
Yeah, that's the administrative side. And for the interpretation of the Basic Law, the PRC, NPCSC has the authority. Now, if we do not have a constitution that creates the NPCSC, where does the interpretation power comes from in the basic law? So when we interpret the basic law, the final interpretation authority of the basic law, we have to look for the NPCSC, and that's where we find it in the Constitution. So you can't say it's totally unrelated, you see.
Michael Davis, do you agree perhaps that we should at least learn about the Chinese Constitution and the role of the party in the Constitution, and we should understand the role of the party in running the country a little bit better?
Well, I think it's always good to learn about something of this nature, the Constitution of China. The question, of course, is whether secondary students need to be given a law course. Most countries, high school doesn't involve the study of law. In many countries, you don't even get to that until you're at graduate level. So using it as an instrument to impose a kind of loyalty on our youngsters is, I think, counterproductive. I think they're more apt to have loyalty if they feel the country is generous to them and not repressive. So that's a separate thing. But, of course, people like us in this conversation, who are mostly lawyers, are bound to understand something about the Constitution, and especially if we take cases to court, we need to understand the role, what laws apply, as Professor Lin Feng just said.
Okay, some more thoughts from listeners. This is from Carol Peterson, first of all, a law academic now at the University of Hawaii, formerly in Hong Kong. Says, first of all, should we accept we are part of Red China? No, I do not think that Hong Kong should consider itself part of Red China. This is a very outdated phrase. I don't think it's commonly used now to describe mainland China, let alone Hong Kong. In the past, this phrase was often used to refer to communist China, but clearly Hong Kong does not have a communist system. Moreover, the entire point of Article 31 of the Chinese Constitution is to allow for special administrative regions which are not communists. With civil servants now receiving briefings from prominent party officials, is the party changing its role here? This is a question that I put in the sort of introduction to today's topics. Carol Peterson says, yes, based on news reports, it appears that the Communist Party is trying to exert increased influence over decision-making within the Hong Kong government and involving itself in matters that are plainly within the autonomy of the SAR under one country, two systems. If these reports are accurate, then this interference violates numerous provisions of the Joint Declaration and the Basic Law. 3, can a person love China but not the party? The answer to that is obviously yes. I imagine that many people, not only in Hong Kong but also in mainland China, love China but not the Communist Party. 4, what is the relationship between China's Constitution and the Basic Law? Article 31 of the Constitution allows for the creation of SARs which can practice different systems than the system practice in the mainland. Article 31 thus empower the MPC to enact the Basic Law. Basic Law clearly provides for a very different system in Hong Kong. For example, Article 5 states that the socialist system and policies should not be practiced in the SAR. This is an additional reason why it would be incorrect to refer to Hong Kong as part of the part of communist China. Matthew says, Phyllis, Lawrence, once again you are both talking nonsense as you try to defend the indefensible. It sounds patronising and like you don't even believe it. Hong Kong people understand very well the way the CCP works and that it desperately needs to convince or force people to believe the country and the party are one in order to legitimise its dictatorship, and that is exactly why they reject this nonsensical idea. A country and a political party can never be one in either a democracy or a dictatorship, except in the minds and dreams of those in power. The long history of China and other countries proves this. Show me a dynasty which was impermanent. The more you push this, the more people will resist it, and the shorter the CCP dynasty will be. Use your time to help Beijing understand this. It would add much more value to them and to Hong Kong. That comes from Matthew. Longer comments on our Facebook page, just edit them a little bit. Mike says, Communist Party rules China with an iron fist. What they say goes. How they interpret the Constitution or the Basic Law is not debatable. It's as simple as that. TC says it's perfectly conceivable for one to love your country but loathe its regime or governing party at the same time. China isn't or should be any different. The problem is that for much of its existence, Chinese civilization has had very little experience as a nation-state, but rather being the subject of a ruling dynasty or party. Thus, most ethnic Chinese simply put an equal sign between country and party without really understanding the difference between the two distinct concepts. Henry, though, says the Constitution states that the CCP leads the country and allows the country to establish SARs. Why don't some accept the CCP? I think the main reasons are past movements like the Cultural Revolution. The West has hated communism from the days of USSR. Western influence of media helps steer people's perception of China in past decades. That's from Henry. Thank you very much indeed for those comments. Lawrence Marr,
yes, I want to respond to that reader.
Yeah, please, go on.
Well, if you think that the only dual-party dictatorship in, say, countries like Australia and America is the only legitimate system, you are wrong. You are still living in the era of an outdated Western democracy dominance. Because in this era, you can see that China has progressed so well economically, as well as protecting the environment and other things, and advancing to a state which benefits the whole world. I mean, if you still live in eras of Western dominance and treasuring dual-party dictatorship, because either you elect the Liberal Party or the Labour Party in Australia, those parties will come to power interchangeably. So, I mean, if you want to say that China's one-party system is not legitimate because of a dual-party system in foreign countries are more legitimate, then you're wrong.
If I can interject here, I think what Carol Peterson is trying to say is what is the method that Hong Kong has been established, and not to delegitimize China. That's up to China how it runs its system. And Lin Feng has also highlighted the kinds of promises that were made. And I think that's where the legitimacy of the one country, two systems model lies, in these guarantees. Those were the things that were put in place to make Hong Kong people feel at ease with the system and to gain their support. And I think erosion of those things is certainly not in China's interest.
Oh, yeah, of course, I agree with that, because I'm not referring to Carol Peterson's comment. There's another reader which says that there's no legitimate Communist Party system in China because it's a one-party dictatorship.
Yeah, Phyllis.
Yes, just can I clarify myself? Well, let's get out of the Cold War mentality, and the communist is something quite terrible. Yes, we are part of Red China, but that doesn't mean that Hong Kong is to be red. Hong Kong is not red and doesn't need to be red. We are not. We are a capitalist country, our city, and Hong Kong is not red. And there's no need for Hong Kong to become red. We maintain our own way of life for at least 50 years, and that is guaranteed.
But Phyllis, I mean, you must accept that Beijing officials are now putting increased influence in Hong Kong and by reiterating this kind of discourse. So what does this signal? The next 20 years might not be the same as the last 20 years. And I still remember that President Jiang Zemin in 1997, he did say a lot and emphasize that the central government would not intervene into the affairs of the HKSAR. But now there is more intervention and more influence.
Well, I just have to say that, one country, two system is not a static thing. It is growing. And I think both those in Beijing and in Hong Kong will have to learn, and we have to work out the way that we both feel comfortable, which is profitable to all. And I think that Director Wang Zhenming has said that, in the next 20 or 30 years, we have to learn to study the relationship between one country and two systems. And that is something that we all should learn, should put our heads together, and just to make it beneficial to everybody, and not to divide. The way forward is to unite, not to divide, and to feel comfortable, not to be afraid of each other.
Lin Feng, do you want to comment, Professor Lin?
Well, there, if you look at one country, two systems as the party's role, I think the mutual respect, as what Professor Backchat said at the forum, I think is essential, because actually on that day I chaired the forum. And that's what he emphasized at the end of his presentation that day. So mutual respect, I think, is very essential.
Okay, Michael Davis, do you agree with that? I mean, was this something more than mutual respect?
I think the thing is though we can as scholars and journalists, we can say that obviously any country should have mutual respect, including two systems in China. But I think you have to look at how things are done. When people feel a lot of pressure, they feel there's more and more interference in Hong Kong. You know, if we say that the basic law model is growing, one of the things it promised to grow was universal suffrage, and that's not been delivered. So there's a direction in there that suggests that it would be more open and more liberal, and it seems to be going in the opposite direction. And I think we have to expect people react to what's happening, not just to some ideal of mutual respect. And I think, of course, mutual respect is an ideal that you would like to see achieved, but I don't think it's achieved by more interference, making people feel more nervous about the integrity of the Hong Kong system. I think it's quite the opposite has to be done. In some ways, if this interference were less, in fact, I suspect if universal suffrage had been allowed in this last exercise, that there would be no talk of independence, and the politics in Hong Kong would be much less radical, and people would feel more happy about the way the one country, two systems is unfolding. So I think we have to look at the public at large and ask whether they should be confident, and they put their hearts at ease, as Deng Xiaoping would have it, based on what's been happening lately.
Okay, last word going to Bowen in an email who says, Dear Backchat, Michael Davis is quite correct to say that the preamble is not an operative part of a constitution. It can be compared to a recital in a contract in that it recites the basic facts. There are certain limitations to Lawrence Ma's argument that since the Chinese Communist Party fought for and won the war, it has the right to lead the country. The idea has a Chinese origin, of course, but it's not universal. Lee Kuan Yew famously said that the Chinese way of thinking is that whoever fights for the country, in the sense of fighting to own it, has won it and then sits on it. The revolutionaries in North America fought the British in the 18th century and won the war, but they didn't go on to claim that they were entitled to exercise absolute rule over the country and the people the way the Communist Party has done. And in fact, those who won the war against the British considered that the rule previously exercised by the British had been so oppressive that they took great care to limit the powers of government in future so it could not oppress the people the way the British used to do. That's from Bowen. Bowen, thank you very much indeed. Thank you to our guests this morning, to Professor Lin Feng from City University, to Michael Davis, Senior Fellow at the Centre for Comparative and Public Law at the University of Hong Kong, Chairman of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation, Lawrence Ma, and Phyllis Kwong. Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Kwong, who's a practising solicitor, President of the Asia Pacific Law Association. Thank you all very much indeed. 24